In our last segment, we had two members of Congress, and so we heard the high-minded preachment that we should get from members of Congress saying that there's nothing to celebrate tonight. Yeah. I have a feeling that there are millions of people watching this right now in a celebratory mood.
And Lawrence, that's fair. I absolutely think it's fair because we can feel both things at the same time. It's a dark day. This is historic. Nothing like this has ever happened before, although there are plenty of arguments that would say this should have happened a long time ago with other people in Donald's position. But it's not good for the country to have somebody at his level of power continuing to get away with things with such impunity. On the other hand, because he has gotten away with so much for so long, and so many of his victims will never see their day in court, I think it's absolutely understandable that some people would be feeling vindicated and, quite honestly, celebratory.
Yeah, I hate to be the one old enough to have to tell the audience that there was an awful lot of celebrating when Richard Nixon was forced to resign the presidency, and celebrate was the word for it. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. But let me get to what you think your uncle is feeling tonight.
I have to be honest, this is surreal for me. And it's not that I was convinced he would be indicted, but I absolutely believed, based on what we know, he certainly should be, not just in New York, but at least in New York. So even so, I'm having a difficult time processing this. Donald, on the other hand, probably never believed in his wildest nightmares that such a day would come. And why should he have? This is somebody who has gotten away with pretty much everything for decades now, and he's never faced real accountability for any of it. And, much more serious crimes, from his racist rental practices back in the 70s and 80s to all sorts of shenanigans in Atlantic City, to, of course, the big lie, the insurrection of January 6th, and on and on. So I have no doubt in my mind that those quotes are accurate, that he is having a very tough time grappling with any of this. And he may not actually believe it unless and until he's getting his mugshot and his fingerprints taken.
Did his father never teach him that there were legal tripwires all around the Trumps in the real estate business that they had to be careful of? More legal tripwires than the average person has in their lives, not in the real estate business in New York.
No, because in addition to having more legal tripwires, they also had more access to power and more access to people with power who were well connected that could make sure that they never suffered any legal consequences, starting with Roy Cohn. And now we're seeing that after having been convinced by his own father that he should never take responsibility for anything, he's never to blame for anything, Donald is in a position where he knows the difference between right and wrong. He just never in a million years thought it would apply to him.
Mary, the reason I was absolutely certain that your uncle would never run for president, and I was right the first couple of times I said it, and then one time I was wrong and he ran in 2015. But the reason I was convinced he would not run for president is that he had to have, I believed, either enough brains of his own as a wise guy growing up in Queens, picking up a certain amount of street smarts with that, or he had at least one half-smart lawyer type around him or more in his business who could say to him, Donald, you have enough laws around your life right now. If you go into politics, you invite a whole other set of laws that are way more complicated than the laws you're living within now, like campaign finance laws, which is what he's apparently going to be accused of violating. He could have paid off Stormy Daniels and every porn star he ever met for the rest of his life legally if he just didn't get into politics. And I knew he led a life like that. So that's why I thought he wouldn't get into politics, because getting into politics would bring him eventually to a night like this.
Yeah, well, he should have listened to you. And trust me, I'm sure, people in my family who feel the same way you do and probably aren't too happy about the way things are unfolding. But I don't think Donald intended seriously to run just the first couple of times he did. It was a marketing ploy. But then he started gaining traction. And it isn't simply that he was leading in the polls. He was leading in the polls not despite revelations about his racism and his misogyny, but because of them, which just added to his sense of invulnerability. So again, when you are told for your entire life that you can do whatever you want with no consequences, and that gets proven to you time and time again, why would he think otherwise? And let's face it, Donald is not the most agile thinker. He's pretty rigid, and nothing can challenge that sense of invulnerability, except perhaps a few indictments.
Here's why I think this particular case is the perfectly appropriate one to go first, if there has to be a first in a sequence of criminal prosecutions of Donald Trump. Without the crimes committed in this case, there would be no Trump presidency. These were the crimes, according to federal prosecutors in their charging documents on Michael Cohen. These are the crimes that were committed in order to defraud voters, in effect, in the presidential election. These were the crimes that were committed, as the prosecutors put it, to affect a presidential election. The other crimes that he is in line now to be charged with were only committable after he won the presidency. These are the crimes that allowed him to win the Electoral College.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, Lawrence, because too many people have been talking about this case as if it's not a big deal, especially as contrasted to the case in Fulton County, Georgia, and Jack Smith's special counsel case into the January 6th insurrection and the allegedly stolen classified documents. This is a foundational case. He didn't just pay off Stormy Daniels to keep her quiet because it was embarrassing to him personally. As you just said, he did this to sway the results of an election. In November 2016, the American people did not have all of the information they were entitled to before deciding for whom they wanted to vote. And that is the crime that has led to so many worse infractions against the American people, against the Constitution, and against our democracy.
The evidence against Donald is such that I can't see how he can expect to get close to a not guilty in this case without taking the stand himself to specifically refute Michael Cohen. I mean, the chronology of this is just one day. October 28th, 2016, Cohen reportedly called Trump and updated him on the situation. This is the payoff situation with Stormy Daniels. The same day, Cohen and Stephanie Clifford, reportedly signed a contract that effectively promised Ms. Clifford money in exchange for not talking about the alleged affair with Donald Trump. So that's how Michael Cohen's going to testify. He's going to say on October 28th, 2016, a couple of weeks, less than 2 weeks before the presidential election, I told Donald Trump all about where we were, exactly where we were. He has previous conversations to that with Donald Trump. The only person who can refute Michael Cohen on this, on the witness stand, is Donald Trump. And we have all seen that he has no capacity, none, to tell the truth, even under oath.
And not only that, Lawrence, but there was a time when Donald had some self-restraint. He was able to get through a deposition basically by saying nothing. I don't remember, I don't recall, what have you. And we've seen in recent depositions, he can't do that anymore either. He's constantly trying to sell his own narrative. He's constantly trying to point out irrelevant facts or doubling down on the things he's accused of doing. So I do not see at all how, if he is in a position to counter Michael Cohen's evidence or anybody else's, that he will be able to do that without further incriminating himself.
Yeah, I mean, that's the legal box he's in right now, and his lawyers know they have an incredible danger in putting him on the stand under oath. He would get exposed to perjury charges because this case does ultimately come down to Donald Trump's word against other individuals in this case. And if he can't take the witness stand, there just doesn't seem to be a route to a not guilty without him taking the witness stand.
No, and again, for a crime that's already been proven, the person who helped Donald commit the crime was already convicted of the crime. So that's another factor that Donald's Republican enablers do not seem to be factoring in. Plus, of course, there is that need he seems to have to put himself out there, no matter how bad that might be for him. So it is going to be fascinating to see what happens. And I have to be honest, I don't, at the end of the day, and I'm not a lawyer, of course, but from everything we've seen, I don't think it matters one way or the other.